The talented character is one of the toughest archetypes to write in anime and manga. Go too far in one direction, and you fail to capture the essence of what it means to be an extremely gifted person, even amongst other talented characters. Go too far in the other, and you give your character the depth and entertainment value of an overpowered isekai protagonist. But if you were able to find that Goldilocks zone and nail the depiction of natural skill in a manga, you end up with Blue Lock's very own Nagi Seishirou. The protagonist of this video, a character so lazy that Shikamaru might lose his spot at the top, and a prime example of Blue Lock's excellent approach to writing natural talent. For all those extremely unfamiliar with the story of Blue Lock, what you need to know about Nagi is rather simple. In a world where football players have spent years of their life cultivating and developing their skill, honing their craft, and sharpening their sense of self on the field, Nagi is able to match and surpass all of that effort in the span of a few months, invalidating their hard work by nature of his endlessly deep well of potential. The extent to which this is shown in his debut makes it clear to the audience that Nagi is a lazy genius, with his gifted football abilities only being outweighed by his lack of drive and desire, contrary to almost every other character in the story. Lazy characters are one thing and geniuses are another, but it's not every day that you find a character that is built around both of these traits simultaneously, and as a result of this, Nagi is able to start his journey with a bit of a head start, from both an in-universe standpoint and from the perspective of the reader. His unique personality is somewhat abrasive and definitely annoying for reasons I'll explain shortly, but the eccentricity of it all is very much Blue Lock and does make sure that his name and face sticks in your mind more than most. Put simply, the lazy genius known as Nagi makes a very strong first impression. Shikamaru is another character that could be considered a lazy genius, but even he doesn't quite embody this idea in the same way that Nagi does. Shikamaru is a genius, sure, but in a much more straightforward way, and his laziness, while prevalent to his characterization and appeal, isn't so overbearing that it's hindered and squandered his potential to the same degree that Nagi's has. Shikamaru might be lazy and might be a little unambitious, but when push comes to shove, he's willing to do what needs to be done and handle his business. Shikamaru is essentially a tactical genius with little motivation. Nagi is a genius kinesthetically and is closer to being outright slothful rather than simply lazy. And even still, the comparison to Shikamaru is one that assists my point because basically every Naruto fan loves Shikamaru. He may not be in your personal top 5 or top 10, but much like Kakashi and Minato, Shikamaru isn't the type of character that you find many haters for. The fact that Nagi is in any way similar to a character as beloved as this would be a godsend in and of itself, but in very Blue Lock fashion, Muneyuki Kaneshiro takes this one step further and embeds these two traits deep into Nagi's core. Kaneshiro honestly would have been justified in characterizing Nagi as a comically aimless striker, but his passive personality serves two pretty major purposes outside of jokes, and it continues to do so all throughout the series. Firstly, the lazy aspect of the character provides a unique perspective that conflicts quite heavily with everything that Blue Lock is trying to sell you. Nagi is, potentially, a contradiction to all of Ego's ramblings about being an egoist or having the mindset of a striker. If someone like Nagi could get this far and be the core of a team that hasn't lost in the first arc, his ideals, or lack thereof, might just trump Jinpachi Ego's. Passion, drive, and determination have all been the fuel that Isagi and Team Z had been running on for the past 20 or so chapters, and Nagi lacking that fire in such a drastic way creates an automatic sense of tension amongst every involved party. If you're Isagi, you dislike Nagi and what he stands for because he spits in the face of the sport. His lack of effort and slothful tendencies show a complete disregard for the game that he loves and the effort that he has put in to get this far in the Blue Lock program. For a very similar reason people love an underdog story, we as the audience are compelled to root against Nagi because he stands in opposition with what people want to believe about themselves as well. It's quite the tough pill to swallow that a person with talent and no ambition can easily overcome talentless but hardworking people. And whether or not that is reality isn't as important to whether or not we want it to be reality, and sets the table to have Nagi be the dungeon boss fight of the first selection arc. The second really important reason that Nagi's sluggish attitude exists is simply because it creates a justifiable weakness for a character who would just flip this entire manga on its head otherwise. Sure, Nagi's lack of in-game experience also significantly detracts from his ability to easily rise to the top of Blue Lock, but lacking experience is so common for prodigious characters in shonen manga that it would hardly be enough to separate him from the pack. And in a manga where that experience will accumulate very, very quickly, it also isn't enough of a justification for Nagi to not realize the extent of his potential. If he so had the inclination or natural drive for growth in the same way someone like Isagi had, the monster that Nagi Seishirou has become in the story so far would pale in comparison to what is possible for someone of his talent level. By weaving in a lack of innate drive, Kaneshiro is able to immediately establish an initial chink in the dungeon boss's armor and simultaneously set the table for Nagi's character struggle for large swaths of the manga. That last point particularly is a pretty large reason that I like Nagi's character so much, and why I think his existence cements Blue Lock as one of the series capable of perfecting the genius character. Fundamentally, Nagi is someone who doesn't really have ambition. He likes gaming, he likes chillin', and even Rhea recruiting him for his dream doesn't start the flame of Nagi's ego. And I mean, why would it? The game of football is something that comes naturally to him. It's something that no one can challenge him at, and when paired with his proclivity to just do nothing, it's no wonder nothing changes until he is challenged by Isagi in Team Z. For the first time in his football career, Nagi faces an opponent that can collectively overthrow him. Nagi, the dungeon boss, was defeated by the hero's party, but instead of going down for good and disappearing from the Blue Lock video game, Nagi chose to follow the impetus known as curiosity that Isagi and his team created. Now, I call this realistic and very well handled, but I haven't explained why. But just think about it for a second. If you look at life as a big video game, how Nagi is moving as a super talented freak of nature makes quite a bit of sense. He's a level 50 boss who was stuck in an environment full of level 1 mobs. Sure, defeating these mobs may be fun for a bit if you're someone that can intrinsically motivate yourself, but even in the best of cases, remaining in this stage will eventually bore you. Doing something that you know can be done isn't impressive and doesn't provoke change. This boredom is even more potent for someone like Nagi because he only seems to respond well to challenges, to things or people that are able to accurately provoke and push him to change. Because of this, it's only once he's confronted by characters who he perceives as normal mobs that still defeat him that Nagi is able to get a taste of effort. If you've ever played a FromSoft game or fighting game or even your standard FPS, you know what I'm talking about. Once the thought, "I can beat them," pops into your head, it's a sign that the game has successfully grabbed your attention and probably won't be giving it back until you clear this level or reach the limit of your resolve and give up. Kaneshiro does a really good job of making this internal change make sense and easily followable, as like many things in Blue Lock developmentally, it can be broken down with a simple formula. Curiosity plus effort plus passion equals frustration. That frustration is then left to simmer for a bit in your mind until it boils over and demands a resolution. This yearning for victory is desire, and once you desire something enough, even the laziest of people will be willing to put the work in. My relatively recent experience with Elden Ring makes me appreciate this formula even more because it's so obvious that FromSoft has mastered and streamlined it for players like myself. I'm the kind of idiot who will fight the tree sentinel 100 times at level 1 just because I hit him once and saw him take damage. The frustration that comes from losing mixes quite well with the knowledge that I can beat him if I just do better, if I stop spam rolling, if I read his attacks better, if I find the proper path to defeating him. This wall that seemed insurmountable at the start will become nothing more than a stepping stone for me in my playthrough. Nagi's first real taste of ego when facing Team Z functions as the same thing for him, and this analogy becomes even more important and impressive from a writing standpoint when you realize that Nagi has an innate obsession with gaming. In general, unexpected stimulus leads to curiosity of what he can do. That curiosity being piqued leads Nagi to wanting to follow that thread as far as it leads. Following it leads Nagi to exerting himself and giving it his all, and in doing so he has fun and creates passion. This passion is then intensified upon his loss and makes him frustrated. He failed at something, but had the possibility to succeed and still does, and so long as those feelings remain strong, Nagi will keep attempting to surpass his old self and move in a way that the him of the past could never dream of. He's essentially caught in the just one more game, can't end on a loss loop that many gamers find themselves in once they have been properly hooked. Giving this previously passionless character drive to improve while still acknowledging their fundamental flaws and shortcomings creates this dissonance within Nagi's character that is highlighted whenever he is. Following the second selection arc, Nagi wants to improve and wants to grow, but he understands that as he is now, it's impossible. His partner in crime isn't good enough to ignite his passion, and so he sides with Isagi, both selfishly and selflessly leaving Ryo behind, so they're both forced to adjust and level up in this game that just turned up the difficulty. Now, I'd argue that the second selection arc as a whole is one with themes of codependency and over-reliance at its forefront, and this is no less true for Nagi, who is forced to realize how weak he is without Reo. Nagi has no practice in thinking for himself and being self-reliant. He's never had to because the 6 months he'd been playing football, Reo had been right there alongside him, guiding him every step of the way. And just because Nagi got motivation to act on his own, doesn't mean that he suddenly gains extra abilities without working for them. Over the course of this arc, he improves his individual ability with trapping and works to become a striker that can fight solo, but even then, he's always being backed up by a player like Isagi, who's always thinking, always seeing, and always planning, meaning that Nagi doesn't have to bear a lot of that load. This continues for his journey until he finally gets a chance to face Isagi on the field once more. Several arcs later, we get Bastard Munchen versus Manshine City, the game that'll finally allow him to face the hero that defeated him all that time ago. And while Nagi puts up an amazing performance with a world-class goal, just like Ego, I'd argue that his decisions throughout this game only made his future success that much more difficult. Manshine City was built around him thinking for himself and making his own decisions, and while he was merely a baby chick in the experienced eyes of someone like Kaiser, you can clearly see that Nagi is making strides towards change. It's painful and unsightly in some of the ways that he fails to do so, but this is part of the process, and it's what Nagi realizes that Reo and Isagi had been doing for him during his tenure in Blue Lock. Despite being implored to continue thinking for himself and searching for the right answer, Nagi decides to place his trust in Reo once more, as he's the only person on the entire field capable and willing to assist him in destroying Isagi and his recently discovered metavision. This trust allowed him to enter a flow state and pull off the 5-volley revolver shot, one of the best, most acrobatic and impressive goals in the entire story. But I think it is this moment that revised much of Nagi's progress up to this point. Not only did he stop thinking for himself the moment he gave control to Reo, but in defeating Isagi during this one super play, Nagi's reasoning for trying so hard kind of just dissipates. We literally see his aura and ego vanish with the goal, and while I'm sure it's a cathartic moment for Nagi, the question needs to be asked, what now? Now that his goal has been accomplished, his final boss being defeated, what's the point of playing the game anymore? An intrinsically motivated person might go into New Game Plus to see if they can beat the game faster, more efficiently, and with less errors, but that is not the character that Nagi Seishirou is, at least not currently. With where we're at in the story right now, this question still hasn't been answered, but it seems that Nagi is on the precipice of something. Last time we saw him, he was determined to grab hold of anything that would place him on the field and spark his motivation once more. This journey of inconsistency, curiosity, frustration, and lethargy is so interesting to me, even as someone who can't consider themselves a natural god of my respective field, because I think these traits exist within everyone in some facet of their life. Nagi is so interesting because his talent is as much a curse on his growth as it is a blessing. Hardship isn't desirable per se, but challenge is. And when that challenge has to come from someone else giving you a kick in the pants, your motivation will always be subject to their success. Do you only want to get better at your sport to beat one person? Do you only want to improve to spite someone you hate? Do you only want to get better to steal an achievement out of someone else's hand? These questions may be poignant for someone watching this video, and hell, they're important questions to reflect on and ask myself because of how I've linked my own motivation and drive to basic competition, not only competition with myself, but with other people around me. So long as your determination hinges on a specific individual, you will be at their beck and call in some form. When you eventually surpass them, you may lose what it is that made you so focused. And I say this from real personal experience. A person who climbs the mountain to reach the top will never be as satisfied as someone who just loves climbing mountains. And although Nagi has definitely perceived Isagi as his summit, I think the only way for him to grow will be to adopt a mindset that prioritizes intrinsic motivation and discipline over superficial external goals. This isn't to say that external goals or objective milestones are bad, but they can't be the fuel that your car is running on exclusively. Nagi not grasping this immediately and struggling to find his flame is really enjoyable and unique compared to most Blue Lockers, and it's why I think he's the perfect example of the talented character in any given story. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more Blue Lock analysis like this, subscribe, hit the bell, and check out this playlist, which has all of my Blue Lock content thus far. I hope you enjoyed the video, and as always, I'll see you in the next one.